A few years later, in 2020, ex-police captain Igor Andreevich Kryukov is released from prison and is warned by the prison warden to behave and never return. At present, at a local high school in St. Petersburg, Russia, a visibly anxious English teacher named Nastya storms out of the classroom, rushes to the third-floor window, jumps, and dies. Moments later, the police show up at the scene, cordoned it off, and start to collect the necessary pieces of evidence. As he continues his discussion with Principal Lyudmila, who firmly believes the incident couldn't be anything but self-inflicted, Igor looks out of the window to observe the reactions of the shocked 11th grade students who have gathered around the scene and notices one of them in a heated argument with an adult man. Igor wraps up his discussion with the principal, goes to the 11th grade classroom, introduces himself, and starts taking attendance of each student. The detective jots down Mikhail Barkovsky, Bark, leader, and the one he saw earlier arguing with the older man, Natasha Belodadova, Marat Galimov comic and Natasha's boyfriend, Georgy Dovzhenko Gosha, the athlete, Anna Milkova, the doll, Olezha Pali tomboy, Kristina Suvarova, Ruslan Kudyakov, the clown, Irina Sharina, the dark horse, Maxim Yurov, the insolent, and finally calls out the recently deceased Alina Rusanova. A year ago, the then principal and Alina's father, Yuri Vasilyevich Rusanov, interrupt the class to introduce the new student Bark to the 11th grade and asks the students to welcome him. At present, Igor continues to establish a timeline as he learns from the students that the boys were at the gym while the girls stayed back to practice an English song with the help of Anastasia for an upcoming show before she abruptly runs out of the classroom. The detective then singles out Georgie and asks him to detail what happened when Anastasia rushed into the gym, and as he starts to narrate, he stammers. Bark then takes over and answers the question for Georgie by detailing that their teacher came to the gym just for a moment before she ran down the stairs and jumped out of the window. After a few moments, the detective dismisses the class. Igor goes to see the coroner, Tosha, who he has a complex relationship with, as she finishes her preliminary exam at the school grounds and learns that the deceased died of a broken spine consistent with the fall. As soon as the detective leaves, Tosha is shocked to learn from her lab analyst colleague Sioma that Igor's wife had killed herself by jumping out of their apartment building. Meanwhile, in Lyudmila's office, Lyudmila warns the physical education teacher, Vladimir, to keep his mouth shut and orders him to go home. Later that day, Georgie and Olesha practice swimming at the school pool, and Olesha storms out in anger as Georgie subtly downplays their relationship as just a friendship. Elsewhere, after hanging out for a couple of hours, Christina and her older boyfriend drop off Anna, who makes sure to change out of her short skirt and take off her heels before going home, so that her abusive father won't beat her. However, when she gets home, her father beats her anyway for staying out too late. Later that evening, all the students try to occupy themselves with different activities. To her mother's horror, Natasha discovers that her last eye surgery didn't take and that she's going blind. A year ago, a few days after he joined the school, Bark has lunch in the cafeteria and carefully watches how everyone interacts. Moments later, Georgie gets up as Ruslan eggs him, rips off Irina's blouse, and makes fun of her figure, while everyone laughs. Bark runs to the scene and rescues Irina by pulling down Georgie's pants and embarrassing him. He then comforts Irina, compliments her on her figure, and scolds everyone. Later that day, Georgie tries to pick a fight with Bark, but he is once again overpowered and embarrassed. At present, Igor runs into the police department head, Anya, with whom he was caught having an affair by his wife. A year ago, and as a result of which, his wife killed herself, rudely snubs her off, and heads to his houseboat. The next day, Bark tells his classmates to relax about the events, and proposes that they should all go play Sparta in the IT room to take their minds off things. All follow his suggestion and head out except Maxim, who never partakes in the game and is the only one who's not under Bark's spell. At Nastya's apartment, Syoma informs Igor that half the pages of the deceased's diary have been ripped out. Then, Anya, who planned to close the case as there's no evidence of foul play, decides to give the detective 2 more weeks after hearing his logic, that if Natsya wanted to kill herself, she would have jumped out from the higher floors instead of the 3rd, and his speculation that the case might have been an urged suicide. Tosha then shares that severe bruising and hematoma have been found in the post-mortem exam, which suggests Natsya was assaulted about a month before her death. Back at the school, Igor learns from the principal that the students threw a spontaneous surprise birthday party for Natsya a year ago at Christina's parents' country house, which made all the other teachers jealous. Upon further inquiry, Lyudmila informs the detective that Bark is one of the brightest students and a joy for any teacher. A year ago, Bark turns down Alina, who comes onto him in the school hallway, and instead rushes to talk to Natsya. At present, Igor goes to the IT room, speaks to ex-hacker turned professor Ignat Antonovich, and forces him to enter and look into the students' activities as they are all immersed in playing the virtual reality game called Sparta. Ignat reluctantly enters Sparta, and both he and the detective are shocked to see all the students except Maxim through their virtual persona and are engaged in inappropriate sex games and violence. However, as soon as Bark notices the detective, he quickly shuts down the game, which causes all the students to file out of the room as he follows them with a smirk on his face. In 2020, after leaving prison, Igor goes to see Anya at a local diner and asks her to give him a gun, which she refuses. At present, one morning, Irina waits outside an apartment for her younger brother and twin sisters, who live with their mother, and takes them to school while promising to get them expensive gifts for their birthday. Igor goes to see Anya at her office and is confused to learn that a government official named Shorin has suddenly become interested in Natsya's case. Meanwhile, at the high school, as Igor watches from afar, Bark greets his girlfriend Irina and gives her money so that she can buy her siblings the expensive gifts she promised. The students then head to class to see Marina Ivanova for their biology class. In the middle of the session, as Marina gives discussion points, Marat asks to be excused and runs out to look for jobs online. Igor seizes this opportunity, approaches Marat, tries to friend him, and asks him if he knows where Bark gets money from and who Irina's father is. A year ago, Bark flirts with Natsya and brings her to the country house where all the rest of the students wait to surprise her for her birthday party. The young teacher is overwhelmed with joy and thanks everyone, especially Bark, who admits that it was all his idea. At present, Marat tells the detective that he doesn't know anything and rushes back to class where Maxim and Bark are about to fight. Marina dismisses the class and Marat shares Igor's inquiries with Irina, who immediately calls her father to inform him of the developments and ask how she should proceed. Elsewhere, Maxim looks from the outside as Marat informs everyone about the detective's activities, which leads Bark to warn the group to do as he says so that they can be okay. Igor then heads to the IT room to learn more about Sparta, and Ignat shares that the game was installed despite his advice by the former late principal, Yuriv, who made a deal with the game developer. Igor takes this information to Lyudmila, who denies knowing anything about it, and instead tells him that the 11th graders are influential in the school in that they have passed a law to ban the use of gadgets in the classroom, use of alcohol, drugs, and even managed to have the cafeteria menu changed to a healthier one. Igor then asks Lyudmila about the speculated relationship between Ignat and Natsya, but she denies knowing anything about it. Before they can finish their discussion, Igor suddenly starts having flashbacks of his wife's death and rushes out of the office. As soon as he leaves, Lyudmila calls Vladimir and tells him to never step outside. Bark follows the sick detective to his home and asks to chat with him. After chatting a bit, Bark agrees to make a chart of everyone's whereabouts during the time of Natsya's death. Meanwhile, Lyudmila rushes home and, after making sure he has complied with her orders, comforts the scared Vladimir. A year ago, Principal Yuriv calls Bark into his office as a representative of the 11th grade and, in the presence of Ignat, introduces him to a mega game developer representative named Alexei Petrovich Sotnikov, who had proposed to have the students test their new game Sparta in exchange for donations of high-tech computers on which they can run the game. Natasha goes to the hospital with her mother and learns that she needs another expensive surgery, which she rejects for fear of the pain that would accompany it. Marat suggests asking their classmates for money so that she can go abroad for treatment, but she refuses. Elsewhere, Igor goes to see Tosha at the morgue and is informed that about 6 weeks before her death, Natsya had suffered a fall down the stairs and advises the only way to know further is to find the location of the accident. After discussing Sparta with Bark, Alexia declares that Bark will be leaving school once the investigation is concluded. Bark then heads to his luxurious villa, which he shares with Irina, turns on Sparta, invites all his classmates through the game, orders them to write their whereabouts at the time of the incident, and signs out. The The rest stay and keep playing out their fantasies through their characters as Anna kills herself, Olesia runs over Gosha, and Marat stabs his father for opposing his relationship with Natasha. Elsewhere, as Igor reads Natsia's diary in her apartment, her devastated friend Gusia Inga arrives after hearing of the incident and declares he killed her. In 2020, Igor goes to the morgue to see Tosha, who is ecstatic to finally have him back, and asks her if she can get him a gun. Tosha refuses to help Igor as she doesn't want to see him get in trouble again. At present, Igor learns that Natsia was having an affair with a student, but that she hasn't mentioned his name to either her friend or in her diary. 2 months ago, Gutsa went to the school to pick up Natsia, but found her in shambles as she ran into the car and frantically admonished herself and her stupidity before asking Gutsa to take her home. At present, Gutsa details that she didn't see Natsia home that day as they fought in the car and just dropped her off at the building. Elsewhere, upon Christina's advice, Anna confides in Bark about her abusive father and asks him for advice. Bark tells Anna that once her father's been handled, she has no excuse to be lazy and fail her classes. He then advises Anna to beat her father until he begs for mercy. A few days later, Irina's estranged father, government official Mr. Shorin, unusually picks his daughter up, and they are driven to school as they awkwardly discuss their situation. At the school, Irina asks Mr. Shorin for money so that she can pay her siblings' school fees, as everyone watches in astonishment. Anna then suddenly decides to ditch class and goes to see her father at his work. Inside the school, Marina comes on to Ignat and tries to seduce him despite his resistance, blackmailing him to reveal his transgressions captured on video if he doesn't do as she wishes. The students arrive in the IT room ready for class, but are disappointed to learn that Ignat has deleted Sparta with the principal's support. Bark excuses himself and storms out of class. Elsewhere, Igor visits Alexei at his office and questions the morality of Sparta and its no rules or restriction nature, but fails to get a definitive answer from the marketing representative. Meanwhile, Anna storms into her father's work, pulls him aside, and tells him how much he scares her. Unfazed, her father tells her how embarrassed he is of the way she handles herself and demeans her about the way she dresses. Anna then picks up a crowbar and violently starts hitting her father as he screams in pain, telling him how much she hates him until Bark shows up and pulls her away. Back at school, as their basketball team plays, Bark tells Olesia how much Georgie likes her and wants to impress her and repair their relationship. Later, the students gather at an abandoned yard to hand over their location details to Bark so that he can give them to Igor. Then, as Bark continues on to the next agenda, Maxime starts to leave, but is followed by Bark, who tells him not to be jealous of his position. Unfettered, Maxime stands up to Bark and continues on his way. Moments later, Bark finds Maxime's phone left behind and holds onto it. In the evening, at the school, as Ignat plugs in the flash and watches the incriminating video of Anna dancing in the nude, he is interrupted by Anna, who blackmails him to reveal anything if he doesn't reinstall Sparta. Immediately after, Igor arrives and asks Ignat to log him into the game and show him the ins and outs of the before, forcing him to hack his way into the game and give him the list of all the characters and opponents made by the students. Elsewhere, at her house, Anna takes charge as her injured father wants her with a changed attitude. At his houseboat, Igor is visited by Bark, who gives him the location and shows him Maxime's phone, in which he finds a text from Natsia telling him to never text her again. In 2020, Igor meets up with Ignat, and after chit-chatting a bit, Ignat starts to update the newly free man on what happened to the key players. At present, Igor recovers from his shock and orders Irina to sit down, but instead, she abruptly starts running out of the apartment. As Igor chases Irina, who immediately calls her father to inform him of the situation, Bark rushes to his computer and sends a message out to Sparta, which is received by all the students, who happen to be in the IT room. Recognizing the signal, the students simultaneously shut off the game, gang up on Ignat to delete the game, and beat him up when he tries to resist and stand up to them, until they are interrupted by Vladimir, who barges in, shooting his gun and demanding to see their leader. As the kids freeze in shock, Lyudmila and Marina arrive just in time to put a stop to the madness, and the principal is forced to call the police on her stepbrother. Meanwhile, at Bark's apartment, Igor catches and brings Irina back and questions her about her involvement in Alina's death. Then Igor informs Irina that Bark isn't a teenager and is, in fact, a 26-year-old divorcee with a 3-year-old son. Irina is deeply hurt and unable to take it any longer. She confesses that she was there at the time of Alina's death. 1 year ago, Irina goes to visit Bark early one morning and is heartbroken to run into Alina as she leaves his flat after spending the night with him. Alina tells Irina that Bark is sleeping, and the ladies start walking back so that Alina can go home and freshen up. On their way, Alina mocks Irina harshly and hurts her feelings. As a truck passes by, Alina trips and falls into the street, screaming and searching for Irina's helping hand, but Irina refuses to offer help and sends her classmate to her death. At present, Shorin, Anya, and Tasha arrive at Bark's apartment, and upon learning of the events, Shorin, with his daughter's interest at heart, tells everyone to stay out of the case and orders Bark to address the scandal of his age at the school the next morning. Igor refuses to follow the order, suggesting that Irina's an eyewitness in Alina's death and is escorted out by Shorin's men to the prison. However, outside the apartment, Igor outsmarts the guards and escapes. At the airport, Natasha and Marat share a loving farewell as Natasha sets off to Germany with her mother for her surgery. Back at Bark's apartment, Shorin is informed that Igor has managed to escape and becomes furious. He then warns and threatens Alina to find him and bring him forward as soon as possible. The rest of the students gather at the yard and discuss how to proceed without Bark by retracing their steps and trying to tie every loose end by methods that Bark had already set forward. At Bark's apartment, Sharona gets Bark's statement, along with Alexei's information as the apartment is registered under him, and pulls Irina aside and protectively plans out her bright future until she shocks him by informing him that she's pregnant. Upon hearing the news, Bark hides his shock and nonchalantly tells Irina to leave with her father. A month ago, the students chase the passenger of the truck that hit Alina and forces her to tell them everything she knows while brutally beating and threatening to kill her until Vladimir intervenes to help scare them away. At present, Vladimir shares that he had planned to go to the police with the information but was blackmailed by Bark, who had managed to get his file that mentions his pedophilic tendencies from his previous school. 10 years ago, at Novosibirsk school, a timid Bark presents a disturbing speech about executing morally disabled and disadvantaged people with genetic anomalies for the greater good of society and mentions the Spartans as an example, which disturbs his teacher and allows his classmates to make fun of him. Igor, Ignat, and Maxim all meet in Maxim's home and review the hallway surveillance footage from the day Natsia died and see her leaving her classroom and making her way up the stairs. However, Igor wonders what happened during the 16 minutes between the time she left the classroom. Ignat provides the group with Natsia's phone, on which Maxim had sent her a picture he had received from a stranger, which shows Natsia undressed and posed on the couch with Georgi, Marat, and Ruslav surrounding her. Igor studies the picture and recognizes the surroundings to be Christina's house. Igor then heads to Christina's house to question her about the pictures and learns what happened that day. 1 month ago, the kids organize a small get-together at Christina's house and invite Natsia over. As the teacher arrives, Irina is tasked with spiking Natsia's tea with a sedative and gives it to her. Natsia explains the only reason she came is to notify the kids that she is going to put an end to Sparta, as it has changed them for the worse. But before she completes her thoughts, Anya passes out, and the students undress her from the waist up and take compromising pictures of her, so that they will have something to blackmail her with. Igor then meets with Alexei and learns more about Bark. 1 year ago, Alexei gives a job to Bark, who is a divorced college dropout at his marketing firm for game companies. Bark then comes up with a new idea and pitches it to Alexei, a gaming company client, to change their current boring game into Sparta, a game targeted at teenagers and with no rules, so that the audience can experience everything they may not be allowed to in real life. To gather data about the guilty pleasures of teenagers, Bark agrees to disguise himself as a teenager and joins the high school. Meanwhile, at the school, Bark stands in front of the class, while all the staff, Shorin, his men, and his classmates gather and reveal his true identity, to the shock of everyone. Bark then coldly adds that everyone in the room is a criminal and subtly suggests that the students have something to hide. As his teachers prepare to call the police, Bark starts exposing their secrets right then, which proves too much for Lyudmila, passes out. As all the grown-ups leave the classroom to call the ambulance and tend to the principal, the students lock Irina out, surround Bark, and start hitting Bark senseless while Maxim stays out and watches from the sidelines. Elsewhere, Igor calculates how the students will probably react and rushes to the school while fighting with his seizures, finds Bark bloodied, and scolds the students out of the classroom with Maxim's help, promising that Bark will get what he deserves. Irina stays behind to check on Bark, and as Igor falls down with his seizure, she kicks his medicine away with Bark's encouragement for what he planned to do to Bark. She then rips her blouse, asks Bark to hit her, and stages the scene to look like Igor was trying to rape her, and that Bark helped her before she starts hysterically screaming for her father. Igor is wheeled and taken into the ambulance in handcuffs. A few days later, Igor watches on as Irina lies on the stand to have him convicted and sentenced to 3 years in prison. On the day of Natsia's death, Natsia enters the classroom and finds the girls chit-chatting while the boys are doing their physical education lesson. As she enters, the girls make degrading remarks, and as Natsia tries to stand up to them, Irina threatens to post compromising pictures. After learning the pictures were Bark's idea, Natsia rushes to the gym to talk to him, but instead finds the boys beating Vladimir after he asks them for money to not sell them out to the police about what they did to the truck passenger lady. As Natsia tries to free Vladimir, Bark orders the boys to hold her down and threatens to rape her as she violently tries to escape. As the chase continues through the stairways and corridors of the school, Natsia trips and falls out of the open third-floor window to her death. The boys are extremely shocked, unlike Bark, who quickly collects himself, comes up with a cover story, and warns Vladimir if he talks, he will blame it all on him. At present, Maxim visits Igor in the prison, narrates what happened to Natsia, and tells him that he wants to join the force and be like him. In 2020, Ignat updates Igor about everyone's status. Gosha is in prison for robbery, Christina and Anna failed at starting a business together and hang around clubs taking drugs and partying. Maxim Junior Police Lieutenant Ruslan is being investigated for misuse of a government contract at his firm. Igor then goes to see Bark, who has shockingly become a teacher, and he hears him as he lectures, asking his students who they are prepared to get rid of to achieve their dreams. Before leaving class, Bark reminds his students that weakness of any sort is a crime. After class, Igor meets with Bark at a bare building where multiple students hang out playing Sparta, and after showing Bark one of his childhood recordings, shoots him in the head. No one even notices the incident as everyone is in their reality world, and Igor walks away without even a word. In 2020, out of luck to find a gun, Igor calls and negotiates to buy one. At present, Igor goes to see Maxim's mother, who is extremely proud of her son's hard work to get himself off the streets, study hard, and get into the best high school in town. Upon further probing, the mother shares that even though she hasn't met the girl, she believes that Maxim is in a relationship, and unwittingly, and to the shock of Igor, the name Natsia, Igor approaches Maxim, and after relating that he knows everything, asks him why he wasn't in the gym with the rest of the boys at the time of the incident. However, Maxim is not bothered by the insinuation and declares that he will only talk with a lawyer present and storms off. Igor then goes to Igna to see the students' opponents in Sparta and learns that the late Alina was Irina's opponent. 2 months ago, as Bark presents his class project to Natsia and the rest of the class, an emotional principal Yuriv enters the classroom to inform everyone that Alina has just passed away as a result of an accident. Everyone everyone is shocked to hear the tragic news, especially Irina. At Alina's funeral, Irina could no longer hold it together and emotionally runs out. Moments later, Principal Yuriev suffers a terrible heart attack and dies on the spot. At present, Bark gives Igor the detailed whereabouts of all the teachers he took the initiative to collect, except Vladimir. Elsewhere, at Lyudmila's house, Lyudmila tells her stepbrother, Vladimir, how tired she is of hiding him and starting to doubt her decision to give him a second chance by giving him a job at her school. Back at school, Igor is extremely impressed by Bark's detailed information, and after sharing the latest development about the ripped-out diary pages, the detective extends Bark a dinner invitation for all his hard work. Bark agrees and smiles to himself as all his plans of friending the detective fall into place. Later that afternoon, Christina observes Natasha's storms away from her boyfriend, informing him the treatment costs 20,000 euros, which forces the desperate Marat to ask Bark for money. On the other side of the school, Igor informs the principal that he wants to talk to Vladimir and gets her to call the PE teacher. However, Vladimir sees the call while he is at the airport preparing to board a plane and flee the city and ignores it and throws his phone away. Elsewhere, Bark goes to see Alexei at his office and is disappointed to be reminded that he must leave the school soon. Alexei argues that if Sparta and the fact that it had been tested on minors without parental consent becomes investigated, Bark will be imprisoned and urges the young man to distance himself from the school while he can. Bark, however, doesn't agree and thinks it will be too suspicious for him to leave in the middle of exams and that he is successfully diverting Igor's attention away from Sparta and into solving Natsia's case. Before leaving, Bark secretly memorizes the code to Alexei's safe. Later, Bark invites his classmates into Sparta and has them play a violent group level in which they must kill everyone they encounter to pass. Then, as everyone stares, Bark pulls Marat aside in the game and gives him the safe code. The next day, Anya invites Igor to give him the result of his inquiry into Alina's death. Anya takes Igor to a remote road and details how Alina was hit by a truck driven by a man and with a woman passenger. Early in the morning, Igor is then outraged to hear that the suspects weren't charged with their crime, as the street cam footage was accidentally deleted and no other concrete evidence was found. Anya then adds that the suspects are instead put in an insane asylum as they seem to have lost their minds immediately after the incident. Before she leaves, Anya shares her fear that Alina's case might be too dangerous to snoop through and orders him to drop it. Ignoring the order, Igor goes to the insane asylum to visit the suspects. To no avail, as Igor leaves the hospital, he is met by suited officers who take him to see Shorin. There, Shorin introduces himself and tries to assure the detective that his only interest in the case is his daughter's safety. A year earlier, Natsia politely tells Maxim that even though she doesn't feel the same way, she appreciates the poems he's been sending to her house. At present, Maxim goes to Ruslan's house, and after learning that Bark is responsible for giving his phone to Igor, tries to beat and scare Ruslan into telling him what happened at the gym and what the class knows about Natsia's death. Ruslan stands up to Maxim, declaring that he's no longer afraid of him as he doesn't play Sparta. Later that night, as Igor and Bark enjoy their dinner, a young boy approaches Bark, addresses him as a dad, and asks him where he's been. In 2020, Igor goes to see his neurologist, who is happy to see his stroke patient has made it through prison at the hospital and asks to borrow some money. At present, the young boy, who is shortly followed in by his mother, continues to address Bark as his father and asks him where he has been. As a visibly shaken Bark tries to get out of the situation, Igor comes to his rescue and sends the woman away, telling her that Igor is just a teenager and she must have confused him with someone else. Then, after dinner, Igor and Tosha go to see Maxim at his work, and Igor questions the young man about his relationship with Natya. Maxim admits that he was in love with Natya and details that she wanted nothing to do with him even though he tried to impress her. Meanwhile, Igor returns to his home with Tosha, and the two continue to work on the case by trying to figure out who each student's opponents are in Sparta. After some research, the duo is surprised to see that Gosha's opponent is Vladimir and wonders why. The next day, as the group meets at their usual meeting spot in the abandoned yard, they are surprised to find Maxim already waiting for them there. Maxim goes around the group accusing each one of them of changing for the worse, losing their unique identities, and being under Bark's spell, before getting in a fight with Bark and storming off. A year ago, as Vladimir teaches the students free throws in basketball, Georgie feels uncomfortable by the way he comes too close to him, freaks out, and punches him. Elsewhere, Elsewhere, Igor continues his investigation around the school and is surprised to find a secret makeshift room in the boys' locker room with a peephole carved on its wall. Inside, he finds burned up paper and calls stocks for analysis. Back in school, a new PE teacher is assigned and starts training the basketball team. After a few runs, the new teacher tells Gosha that he's not impressed by his skills and threatens to bench him if he doesn't improve soon. Igor comes to see Gosha after practice and asks him about his relationship with Vladimir. Gosha openly details that Vladimir was rumored to be a pedophile towards young men and that he was uncomfortable to have the teacher around him. Marat walks Natasha home and is surprised when she invites him inside for the first time. After chit-chatting a bit, Natasha tells Marat that she wants to be intimate with him while she has the ability to see, and the two sleep together. Meanwhile, after much probing, Gotya confesses that Natsia told her that one of the students had informed her about a peeping room in the boys' locker room, and as she goes to check it out, was forced to hide inside it as a traffic of boys came to change and she didn't want to embarrass them. Igor then searches for the students and finds them cleaning Alina's grave. There, he pulls Bark aside and asks him about the mysterious room in the locker, but is surprised to hear Bark admitting that he knew about it and that Natsia was the one who peeped at the boys. 2 months ago, Bark goes to his class, finds Natsia alone, informs her about the peeping room, and takes her to the locker room to show her. There, he helps the shocked teacher inside the room to show her more, but closes the door on her as some boys come to change their clothes. Natsia watches through the peephole as Bark keeps his cool and goes into her bag to read her diary as she sees him. Natsia watches through the peephole. As soon as the boys leave, Natsia leaves the creepy room and scolds Bark for invading her privacy, but is even more shocked as Bark boldly recites the lines she wrote in the diary about her crush on him and tries to come on to her. Natsia pushes Bark away and storms out of the locker room. At present, Anya calls Igor to her office and tells him if he wants to work the case, he's going to have to do it on his own time as she's closing the case. Igor is dismayed, goes to Tosha, and asks to take her out, but is surprised to hear Tosha reject him, saying she can no longer continue being hurt by him and the love triangle he made with her and Anya. In 2020, Igor returns to his abandoned home and takes time out to unwind and process everything. At present, Igor spends the night with Anya, who is shocked to hear that he is still planning to work the case after taking time off from work. Elsewhere, Alexei goes to Bark's apartment to question him about some money missing from his office and is shocked to see how young Irina is. Alexei pulls Bark aside and after hearing how suspicious of him he is in connection to the missing money, threatens to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, Irina goes to wait for her siblings at the usual spot, but decides to head to her mother's apartment when they fail to show up. Her mother is happy to see her for the first time after the teenager ran away, tells her how different she looks and that the kids are not feeling well. Elsewhere, Natasha's mom drives her daughter to school while begging her to change her mind about the operation. After much debate, Natasha promises to consider it after her end-of-the-year exams and gets out of the car. Out of nowhere, to Natasha's mom's astonishment, Marat throws a paper bag filled with 40,000 euros and walks away without a single explanation. At the school, Igor continues asking around and is informed by the cleaning lady that the former principal respected Natsia until she started having problems with Alina. 2 months earlier, on March 24th, as Natsia runs to her apartment door, she is met by Alina, who's jealous of the teacher's interaction with one of her crushes and out of anger pushes her down the stairs. At present, as the detective watches from a distance, Bark is stopped by the same woman from the restaurant, who after a brief argument asks him to call his mother, who he hasn't spoken to for 6 months. Bark then promises to give the woman money and asks her to leave the school surroundings. Very curious about what's going on, Igor takes a picture of the woman's plates before she drives away. Bark gets to school and meets up with Marat, who has become a little paranoid after stealing the money and suddenly asks him to give him 10,000 of the stolen euros. Marat politely tells Bark he no longer has the money, which angers the leader. Meanwhile, Igor goes to Lyudmila's office with Ignat and asks which of the school security cams works. After some evasive answers, Ignat shares that only 2 of the cameras around the school work, with one being the police camera watching the street around the school, while the other watches the school hallway. Ignat is forced to turn on the hallway cam, and Lyudmila is shocked to see Bark aggressively attack Marat. She runs to break the fight, while the men stay behind and watch through the comer. Lyudmila scolds everyone involved, but is shocked to see how the star student Bark disrespects her. Elsewhere, Anya approaches Tosha and asks for her support so that they can help the man they both love finally crack the case. Igor takes Ignat to his office so that he can have detailed footage and learns that the 11th graders had lobbied to have the security cameras around the school removed. Lyudmila gathers all the students in their classroom to detail how disappointed she is in them, but is interrupted as the students see Bark getting beat up by a group of men through the window. The kids rush out to rescue Bark. Meanwhile, Igor has the footage from the morning of March 24th pulled up and learns that Alina has seen Natsya and her crush kissing in the classroom and rushes away in tears, followed by the embarrassed teacher and the half-naked Bark, which explains why she attacked the teacher later that day. As he continues his investigation, Igor hears the chaos, sees the fight through the window, and rushes down. At the school gate, the students get there and violently beat up the Bark's enemies. Igor rushes to Bark, but once safe, scolds them for the way they handled it instead of calling the police. Anya and Tosha go to the insane asylum with a woman passenger and learn that there was another girl with Alina at the time of the accident. 1 year ago, Alina waits for Bark and aggressively comes onto him, asking him to be her boyfriend before threatening to make his life miserable once he turns her down. At present, Igor goes to Bark's apartment to figure out what is going on and shows Bark the video footage of him running out of the English classroom half naked, but Bark denies everything and comes up with one lame reason after another. Then Irina walks into the apartment unwittingly and is shocked to see the detective there.